Dual Blades. The most requested video I have for Sunbreak so far is what is the Dual Blade build. When we're starting to see numbers like this from Dual Blades, it's a very exciting time. Triple digit damage for Dual Blades is ridiculous when you consider how fast you're attacking and how much damage that actually is over a period of time. To say the least, I believe currently, as things stand, people are severely underrating Dual Blades and their ridiculous potential in Sunbreak, but I imagine that will change soon as people realize just how strong they are. If you watch my recent Dual Blades guide, well then you'll have a reasoning on why. Element damage is crazy and Dual Blade element at that is brilliant. Thanks to Demon Mode giving us 35% extra element damage when we're in it, the new Spiral Slash scaling off element and affinity in its damage, and also just the really high numbers we're seeing on the Dual Blades for how much element they have on them. This all combines into this crazy, as you're seeing, potential with triple digit damage. Now, as we are, of course, going to be talking about element builds, in this video, you will see 5 different element builds, and you will use these based on what monster you're about to go hunt. So, you'll equip the dragon build when you're about to go kill something that's most vulnerable to dragon. With that, we'll have 5 weapons and why we picked these weapons, the build that's going to run it, and of course, the math with the weapon and the build combined. And much like most build videos you're going to see in Sunbreak, there's going to be a dereliction version and a non-dereliction version. The reason for that is because dereliction's nuts. It's going to increase our damage to the maximum peak, the absolute peak of the damage we can do, but the downside is you're constantly having your health drained, which a lot of people understandably aren't going to like. So we'll have a normal build and then the dereliction version. Before we begin though, I need to say a huge thank you and give full credit to Josh, aka Rage. I'm a beginner in builds and the math behind it, whereas Josh, of course, he's been doing this for years and he is the main force behind why we're using these builds and the math behind it. I'm just going to be explaining it today. With all of that said then, let's begin the build video. Now, before I show you the armor set, I just need to say that there is a couple of pieces from the final boss in it. So if you're totally against any spoilers, such as like the name of the armor of the final boss, that doesn't actually say the final boss's name, if that's a spoiler, then don't watch. But I've warned you, so let's begin. The armor set you're about to see is for the Water Dual Blades element build. I will be talking about the weapons after the actual armor. And keep in mind, this is the regular build rather than the dereliction, which we'll talk about later. So, we are running the Kaiser Crown X as the helmet, the Archfiend armor for the chest piece, the Divine Ire for the gloves, Archfiend armor again for the belt, and the Kodachi Greaves X for the boots. That full set leads to 7 critical eye, 5 attack boost, element attack at 5 out of 5, critical boost, weakness exploit, critical element, speed sharpening, and chain crit at 3 out of 3. And then we have some extra skills that just kind of are part of it, which are resentment, constitution, and then the very useful furious. For you guys and your builds, I'm going to give you a priority on these skills. Weakness exploit at level 3 is absolutely required. It literally means you do more damage when attacking the weak points, which you should be doing on all builds, let alone, yes, dual blades. Your element attack, be that water, fire, dragon, or whatever, at level 5, that's also vital. Then we have critical eye and critical boost, a no-brainer because we'll crit more often and we'll crit for more. Chain crit is incredible. At level 3, after attacking a few times in a row, meaning always with dual blades, you have 15 extra raw and 15 extra element. Ludicrous. Critical element is also massive because it's going to give us extra critical on our element. And then lastly, attack boost at level 4 or higher is always a nice bonus. At the low end of priority is an answer to sharpness, be that something like protective polish or say a grinder jewel to sharpen faster. Now obviously a big point of contention with build making is always and forever the talisman. What is the talisman you're running and why? This is going to affect how you use your decorations on your armor, and as you can see, the one I'm using is a 3 1-slot talisman that comes with 3 attack boost. So we have the 3 stream jewels here. We have the critical jewel and another stream jewel. I have a crit element plus 4 jewel in the belt. I have a critical jewel 2 in a 4 slot because I need it. Then we have the 2 attack jewels in the chest piece. We have our final element jewel in here in the helmet. And then we have utility. So these grinder decorations you're seeing, this is nice to have, but it's not required. So if you are missing 1 slots, for example, you have a divine talisman that has attack boost on it but doesn't have quite as many 1 slots, don't worry. first thing you should cut out of this build is the grinder jewels, because they're nice, but they're not vital. In the case of the weapons here, we have another 1 slot for that last grinder. But most importantly, you need your tenderizer. That's the weakness exploit in the weapon. Now, for your rampage slot, you can see I'm using Elm Bane. This increases the damage when exploiting a foe's elemental weakness. So if we've got enough element power, enough element weakness, even more damage, wonderful. But if you have a 2 slot for your rampage slot, then you'll want to use the anti-dragon jewel against everything, which will give you, I believe, 5% extra damage, or something specific. So if you're against an aerial monster, then you'll go anti-aerial, and you get plus 10% instead. So it's obviously worth it to use the decorations that are specific, like say to aquatic monsters here, over the universal one, but sometimes you have to use the universal one. Now it's time to talk about weapons, because you're clearly seeing I am holding the Almudron Dual Blades for the water element. The Mud Shredders here are great for a number of reasons. Their baseline attack is 300. They have this nice long bar of white sharpness, 62 water element, which is very good, and then the 0% affinity. Further than that, we have a 2 and a 1 slot for the decoration slots, which is really good, and then even a 3 slot for the rampage slot, which is incredible. This makes for our top pick for the water weapon. But now let's talk about why, the math behind it to show exactly why it's the top pick. Alright, so how do we work out the value of a weapon? First, we need to take its attack, its sharpness, and its affinity. So we have 300 base attack on these Mud Shredders, right? And then we have white sharpness. Now, white sharpness will times the attack's value by 32%. So our attack and sharpness together is 396 in value. Then we'll want to times that by our affinity. The thing is, we don't have any affinity on the Mud Shredders, so very simply, we just remove that from the equation. 100% affinity would be plus 25% damage, whereas minus 100%, well, that'd be minus 25% damage. Since that doesn't apply here, though, we just move on. 396 being the value of our weapon so far. But then we also have element damage, right? Element is also times by the sharpness. White sharpness for your element is going to times it by 15%. 15% of 62 in this case is 71.3, so we're going to round down to 71. So we can say this weapon is worth 396 raw, and then we have 71 as your element. But it goes a bit further than that, because we have awesome decorations on this weapon. Now we have to give value to a decoration, and the best way we found to do that is to say a 2 slot is worth 2% extra damage. And that is literal when you look at improving your attack power by 1 or your critical eye by 1, because 1 critical eye at a certain point is plus 5% affinity, right? That's plus 2% damage, assuming you have crit boost 3. So in the case of the Mud Shredders here, we have a 2 slot and a 1 slot. The 1 slot's not relevant, so the 2 slot plus 2%. So the 2 slot is another 2% damage. So we have a raw attack of 396. We times that by 1.02. That brings us to 403.92. We're going to round that up to 404 though. So our raw attack for the Mud Shredders is 404 and the element is 71. Now this is valid if the sharpness is relevant and acceptable for gameplay. So let's say we had purple sharpness, right? That would increase our raw by 39% and our element by 25%. That's obviously better than white, as you know, but can we really say that those numbers would be fair if we attack 3 times and then the sharpness breaks and it goes down to white? So this formula works if your sharpness is acceptable, that you can do, say, 30 hits with a regular weapon before you need to sharpen again. So I presented this math to you to validate the reasoning behind the Mud Shredders pick, the Almudron Dual Blades. With that information and formula, you could go work out all the dual blades and the value of them and then stack them against each other. And that's essentially what we've done. Now, before I show you the weapons, a quick reminder, when you swap from, say, water, where we're using the water attack decorations, we're going to swap to our fire dual blades. And as you can see in those slots, instead of water element attack, I now have fire attack. So replace these each set with the correct element. With that, I've kind of revealed which of the fire weapons I picked, which is the Magma Shredders from Magmadron. These things are very similar to the Almudron, brilliant in fact, 300 base raw and similar sharpness, but hey, the fire one gets 2 extra fire element for some reason. Not to mention, instead of having a 2 and a 1 decoration slot like the Almudron version, we just have a single 3 slot, meaning when we're using this set, we're going to have to drop 1 speed sharpening because we don't have that 1 slot. Not really a big deal, but just keep that in mind. Once again, that does mean we can use Elm Bane or swap to anti-specific or anti-generic, depending on what we're fighting and why. Next then, let's look at Ice, which is one of those more complicated ones. These are, of course, the Lunar Garon Dual Blades. And those are one of the weapons that has lower element but higher baseline. As you can see, it comes with 320 attack, which is very nice. Not to mention the nice bit of purple sharpness, which is definitely going to increase your damage by a significant amount. The alternative to that is, of course, the Kushala weapons here, which have 54 ice and, yeah, a tiny bit of purple sharpness. The reason I have picked the Lunar Garon over the Kushala ones, half the time you're going to be facing a monster that has okay of that element weakness, and half the time you're going to be facing a monster that has really high of that element weakness. In an ideal world, you would have both Kushala and Lunar, and then based on what you're fighting and how high its specific ice weakness is, you would swap between them. It's a choice to make, and I picked Lunar Garon to begin with. Once again, we don't have that extra 1 slot, so we do lose that 1 speed sharpening. Again, not a big deal. What is more noticeable is just the 2 slot for the Rampage decoration, so we cannot use Ellen Bane, therefore we're using anti-dragon or more anti-specific to get the permanent % increase. Next up, we have our dragon option, which you may have seen in the intro. These are, of course, the Valstrax Dual Blades. These things are crazy good. 330 attack, despite the fact that it has really high dragon at 52 for some reason. Yeah, it's awesome. Also, it has that long landing strip of white sharpness, meaning you never really have to sharpen with a hunt with these things. That might make you wonder whether you should be using the armor set with that then. To combine the effect of Dragonheart with Resuscitate, and there's the Rampage decoration as well. This is something that's very specific and leads to a specific playstyle. I'm trying to show you a build that works overall. We're going to be looking into that and maybe have a follow-up video for you on that specifically. For now, this makes for a very, very, very powerful dragon element build and makes a lot more sense. Last but not least then is, of course, our Thunder Dual Blades, which you can see are the Now Dual Blades. I do want to say, though, I'm still in the process of finishing this build. I'm currently upgrading these to Rarity 10. For the life of me, I just cannot get the orbs necessary. I've been farming it, but had no luck in time for this video. So just as a placeholder, I have the Rarity 6 version, but as you can see, the Rarity 10 version has 300 attack, just a tiny bit of purple sharpness, 69 thunder, no affinity, and a 2 slot for your Rampage slots. Interestingly, there is no decoration slot there, so we're going to have to drop an attack decoration going down to 4 attack to make up for that missing decoration slot. Now, as you can see there, there's only a tiny bit of purple sharpness. We're going to have to deal with that with a slight change. We're running the Espinas for Embraces, the gloves, instead of the usual Rajang gloves. That's because they come with level 2 protective polish, meaning for 60 seconds after we sharpen, we will not lose any sharpness, meaning we can actually get value out of that purple sharpness and the really, really high element, which is very powerful. So to make up for it, like I said, we have the weakness exploit we would normally have in our weapon, now in our chest, having lost that 1 attack duel. We have our critical duel 2. Because we've changed off of the Rajang gloves, that means we've lost a crit boost and 2 crit eye. So we've got a crit boost in our gloves here. And overall, that brings us down to 5 out of 7 critical eye, while maintaining critical boost 3 and critical element 3. This works out the best option we can get for our damage, but naturally having less decoration slots to work with, as well as the glove change, means we're just going to have to give up something to get that protective polish. We would make this same glove swap if we were running the Kushala Dual Blades versus the Lunar Garon Dual Blades. Our alternative pick in the case of Now We're Here then is, of course, Zinogre Dual Blades. So now we need to take the weapons and combine them with the value of the skills that are coming from our decorations and our armor set skills. So let's use the Almudron Water Dual Blades as we've just been looking at. They had a raw attack of 300 and an element of 62 to begin with. So let's start with the raw attack of the weapon. We're getting plus 8 attack from the 5 attack skill, and we're getting plus 15 attack from when we've got 3 chain crit active. So that's 323. Now having 5 attack also gives you some extra attack %. So from having 5 attack, we're going to times 323, so that's 342. We also have white sharpness like we talked about. That's going to increase our damage by 32%. So 342 times 1.32, that's 451. And then lastly, we need to take our affinity into account. Now, I'm getting 40% from the armor skills, and we're going to get 50% affinity from weakness exploit when attacking a weak point with that hit zone of 45 or higher. We're doing plus 40% damage 90% of the time we're attacking, so 40 times 0.9, that's 0.36. So our number was 451, we're timesing that by 1.36, aka 36%, and the final raw attack value of these weapons is 613 using this set. not too bad. Then we need to work out the element in much the same way. Our baseline element on these dual blades is 62, and we're getting +4 from our water attack 5, so that's 66. And then when chain crits activated, we're getting +15, so 81 element total. Now water attack 5, or element attack 5 rather, is going to give you 20% increase to your element damage. So 81 times 1.2, that's 97.2. We're going to round down to make it fair, 97. Then we have our white sharpness. As we mentioned earlier, white sharpness equates to 15% increased element damage. So 97 times 1.15. That brings us to 111.55. We round up this time to 112. And now we need to do our affinity at the end. Once again, we have the 90% affinity. Essentially, this means we're doing +15% element damage 90% of the time. So 15 times 0.9 once again, that brings us to 13.5. So we need to times 112 by 13.5%. That's 112 times 1.135. And that brings us to a nice total of 127.12. We'll round that down to 127. That's 127 element. So the final set with the Almudron dual blades for our water set is a raw attack of 613, an element of 127. And that's before, we're like actually in demon mode, which is going to increase it further. This is the math behind the set. This is the math behind the weapon and why we picked the weapon itself. Last but not least then, it's time for me to talk about dereliction, which is technically your highest DPS and, well, I guess best overall set. The downside here is that this curio that's flying around me is draining my health constantly. So as time passes, you can see my health is just being slowly chipped away. It takes 60 seconds for this curio to drain enough power to then, as you can see, now generate another curio. That is slowly increasing my power. And after enough time, we have our third curio here. So it takes 2 full minutes to reach full power, but this is going to give us the maximum damage we can do. As you can see per the description, Curio will continuously drain our health, but bolster our attacks. The more Curio you have, the more bolstering of your attack. So while we're in the red scroll using dereliction, we have increased element and status. While in the blue scroll, we have increased raw attack and stun potency. Higher levels will further bolster our attack, but basically what we're getting for this while playing in red scroll is an extra 15 element, which is very good. So our peak damage once we've got chain crit going is all the way up to 377 raw attack and 131 element while attacking while we have dereliction. Just while showing you this, look how much health has actually been drained. Imagine that's happening during combat. So this is why I said at the beginning, this build technically has the best stats, the best output, but there is a heavy cost to running dereliction, and that is the constant health drain. So if you want to run dereliction, there's one change you need to make to the set in terms of equipment. It is to run the final boss's gloves. So just like we did with replacing the Furious gloves to Espinas, we're replacing the Furious gloves with the Archfiend gloves here. These have 2 dereliction on them, as well as resentment, but once again that means we're missing 1 crit boost and 2 crit eye. So we've dropped 1 attack to go down to 4 attack for a expert duel, and then in the gloves we've slotted in that crit boost that we were missing. So we've lost 1 crit eye and 1 attack boost to get 2 dereliction, and overall the damage is worth it. It's just that drain, again, is very risky to play with. If you're looking to get the fastest clear times and get the most output, this is the way to do it. As you've seen though, it does lead to some seriously big numbers. It is very effective, and honestly I found that it's not that bad to have that drain. It's just something I have to manage and be careful with, but I can completely understand if you don't want to run with that permanent health drain and therefore use a set that's a bit easier and a bit safer. In conclusion, we have 3 sets for you to consider. For our baseline build, we've shown you the Furious Rajang glove using build. That'll give you extra defense while playing in red scroll, and of course, a temporary period of infinite stamina in blue scroll. This works perfectly with the water, the fire, or the dragon setups. Meanwhile, for Thunder and Ice, you'll be choosing between Nawa and Zinogre dual blades, or the Kushala or Lunagoron ice versions. Nawa and Kushala have the highest element, but small sharpness to work with. So, in this case, you'll want to swap, putting on the Espinas gloves so that you have protective polish. Then you only need to sharpen every 60 seconds to get that effect, instead of having to deal with it constantly. Or you could be running the Zinogre / Lunagoron weapons, which have better sharpness, but lower element. Then, if you want to truly min-max your build, you'll want to use the dereliction build, using the gloves of the final boss. Then we'll be playing in red scroll to boost our element even further, but dealing with that constant health drain. Ultimately, it's up to you, but I need to talk about all three options and explain why. I hope this gives you the tools you need to make your own dual blade builds now, but there you have it. I am absolutely out of energy now. This video took a lot of work. Once again, a huge thank you to Josh for doing a lot of the calculations and math. I never would have been able to do it on my own like this. If this video has helped you, please do drop a like. We put a lot of work into it. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.